Okay, great. Hi, everyone. My name is Mia Dunphy. I'm the field director for Kelly's campaign and an international educator. And I just wanted to make a quick note before we began, and that all panelists have been invited to speak to share their knowledge and experiences with the community. Their appearance does not indicate any support or endorsement of Kelly Ransom's campaign or candidacy. This is an information gathering effort for the community at large. We thank everyone for their time and sharing their knowledge and experience with everyone. You can go to the next slide, Molly. Okay, and just a brief overview of what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk to Kelly for a sec and hear, who she is and why she's running. We're going to have a brief overview of road diets, and then we're going to have our discussion with our two change agents tonight, Will Vincent and Stephen Morris. And then we'll have a few minutes at the end to take any questions that anyone has. So without further ado, Miss Kelly Ransom herself.
Hello, everyone watching that I've been telling that I had laryngitis all week. I wasn't lying, I do. So just for the record, my name is Kelly Ransom. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm running to be your next District 6 Boston City Councilor, representing Jamaica Plain, West Roxbury, Roslindale, Roxbury, and Back of the Hill. I organized these halls for progress to bring folks on to talk about different things happening in our neighborhoods. So we've already had one for education and for housing and homelessness, and tonight's hall is for transit. And this is just a glimpse at one part of one conversation. There's a lot of things to talk about when it comes to transit, but I really wanted to dedicate time to what we're going to talk about tonight. If you're watching now, awesome. If you're watching later, I appreciate you tuning in, and we will share down there, which that's YouTube speak for under the video. We'll share where you can submit your comments or ideas if you did not attend this event tonight. So first, we're going to start with a presentation from Mia. And this is a neutral presentation about what road diets are, because we realized tonight that we're going to be using lingo that a lot of people don't necessarily know. So we wanted to give the road diet information first.
Okay, great. Molly, you can go ahead to the next slide. Yeah. Okay, great. So road diets, what are they? They are a technique to reduce the number of lanes on roadways to help improve safety and or provide spaces for other modes of travel, which could be footpaths, so widening sidewalks for pedestrians, adding cycle lanes for bicyclists in the area, or to add tram tracks. Either typically these are in the middle of the streets, or to have a center turn lane for left-hand turns. Molly, you can go to the next slide. So this is just two different views of what a road diet can look like. They're kind of the same one, but one's from bird's eye and one's, with the cars involved. And so taking a 4-lane roadway and switching it to have bicycle lanes on the outside, to have 1 lane for forward moving traffic, and then in the center having turn lanes for left-hand turns. You can keep going. And then there are a lot of benefits and drawbacks to having these road diets. And I think we're going to be talking a little bit more about that later. But some of the benefits definitely come with increased safety measures for many different transportation on the roadway. So one is for drivers. We're eliminating the difference in speed in 2 lanes that are traveling in the same direction, which also eliminates weaving between lanes as well. And by eliminating weaving, you can reduce crash frequency on roadways. And then this also increases, if the roadway then adds a lane for cyclists, then it increases mobility and safety of cyclists on the road for having their own lane instead of sharing with cars. Pedestrian crossings can become easier and less complex, that they're only crossing in front of one lane of traffic or 2 lanes of traffic instead of 4 lanes of traffic. And then this can also promote alternative modes of transportation, and then reducing cars on the roads in general. And then if you go to the second one, we come to some drawbacks for road diets. One of them is emergency vehicles don't have space to pass because they would be weaving into other lanes dedicated to either left-hand turns or to bicyclists or tramways. And this can result in longer response times. So people are waiting at home for emergency vehicles. Then this can also add congestion during commute periods because there's only one lane of traffic in one direction, and that can also make drivers divert to side streets. And so neighborhoods can feel busier with side streets having more cars on the road. People can feel less safe, specifically with like pedestrians or cyclists on the side streets. Then there's a concern for survival of businesses. If there is congestion or people are using side streets and maybe there's a cut down on parking, are people going to these neighborhoods and frequenting the businesses if there are problems on the road. And then also city buses in these areas can cause long lines of traffic when they are picking up or dropping off passengers because of the reduction in lane sizes. So that's all that I've prepared, just a brief overview of what they are. And I think we're going to be—
That's our last slide.
Yeah.
For later.
But just kind of what they look like and how they can benefit the community or have potential drawbacks. But I think we'll get more into that with our speakers tonight.
Yes.
Back to you.
So first we're going to talk with Will Vincent of West Rocks Walks. Speaker. Do we normally do speaker view? Right? Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Hi, Will.
Hi, Kelly. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for being here tonight. I'm so grateful. So let's just start. It says, what is West Rocks Walks and what is the mission?
Sure. West Rocks Walks is we're a local community advocacy group. We're a group of West Rockdale residents, and we're committed to improving pedestrian safety and walkability in the neighborhood. We think any one pedestrian fatality in our neighborhood is too many. We're committed to Vision Zero. We think that 0 pedestrian crashes is the goal. I guess that's kind of who we are, I suppose. And then who we're not is we're definitely not by any means experts in any field related to pedestrian safety, traffic engineering, or city planning. And so a lot of what we try to do is definitely there's a steep learning curve for any time you enter into any advocacy work. So we try to pay close attention to the experts and try to support research-driven approaches to improving safe streets. We have no affiliations with any organizations like Walk Boston or the City of Boston in any way. And in part, we do this because we live here in West Roxbury and we love our neighborhood.
That's great. How did you get involved with West Rocks Walks?
Sure. Well, I suppose it started about 2 years ago, and unfortunately there was a pedestrian fatality in our neighborhood. I think that event, along with kind of increasing interest from the community, improving safety along some of our busier streets in the neighborhood, plus some kind of interest from some of my neighbors and friends, and so we kind of decided to start this our advocacy group. It's definitely been an interesting journey. We definitely had no idea kind of what we're getting involved with, especially when it came to all of the community discussion around the Center Street Road Diet. But we actually kind of started off with a different stretch of Center Street that is adjacent to where we live, and kind of going through a walk audit, trying to meet with elected officials and trying to advocate for some improvements with the city and with the Boston Transportation Department. And it's definitely been an eye-opening experience, kind of learning about all what's involved with, I think, improving street safety. And I think we're kind of currently probably in the last year or so with pandemic and kind of more competing, I guess I'll say, more important public issues. We've kind of taken a little bit of a backseat, and so I suppose as maybe there's some normalcy that returns, we may hopefully regroup and kind of get back at it. But again, I think just overall it's been an interesting and fruitful experience, and then hopefully we've been able to impact some positive change for the neighborhood.
Yeah, I mean, the traffic is definitely back to normal from what it looks like, and what it feels like. So I think there's some more normalcy there. I've also heard that a lot of people started their bicyclist journey during the pandemic because they didn't want to go in public transit or ride share for safety reasons. So I think this is a good conversation. I think it's good to get it back up and running. So when you're talking to residents about pedestrian and bicyclist safety in West Roxbury, what tends to be the top 3 things that you hear that they're concerned about?
We hear about traffic speed. We hear about walkability, and kind of especially like safety at uncontrolled crossings or crosswalks where there are no signals. And we also hear about a term that's multiple threats, which I can kind of expand on. So I think the speed issue, is something that is a bit of a challenge for some streets, like in the neighborhood for sure. If you're talking about West Roxbury Parkway or Center Street as it comes in to West Roxbury from Jamaica Plain, we know that these are certainly busy streets, and streets where the average speed is significantly above kind of the posted speed limits on average, and that I think doesn't lend itself well to like feeling safe or positive about walking around in some of those spaces. So I think that's part of the concern there. The uncontrolled crossings part is kind of related to the speed part, and it's also just kind of related to the multiple threats that I mentioned. So basically, when you have roads that are wide enough for multiple cars to pass through, you run into situations when you're crossing a street where one car can stop for you, but then a car that's in that same lane can go around the car and cause another threat or a multiple threat to you if you're crossing the street. And so it causes more conflict points there. And so those are probably the 3 main things that we've heard about and kind of focused on from a safety perspective for people walking around the neighborhood.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a walker and TU rider, but those make sense and those are valid concerns. How could this, I know you said you worked with electeds and made requests and stuff, but just pretend I know nothing. How can the city make streets and sidewalks more accessible and safe to people who walk and bike and hanging out?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think it's addressing some of the kind of concerns that I mentioned that we hear from our residents. It's, one of the main priorities, I think, from the city as a part of their Vision Zero plan was to make walkable and pedestrian friendly main streets districts. And I think the ways that you do that are pretty well established. I think where speeding is a problem, you have to look at road width, and you have to look at crossings to make sure that that people feel safe getting to their destination. And I think those things are important. I think we've seen lots of examples of in the city in the last year of ways that the city has done some positive things to improve.
Yeah.
I think safety for people using like kind of space that has been previously reserved for cars and for people driving, be it traffic lanes or parking lanes, things like expanding outdoor seating for restaurants, parklets, or kind of positive examples. I think of ways that we can think in a different way about public space in a way that benefits more people versus when it's used for one or two parked cars. I mean, ultimately, like you mentioned, I think kind of Kelly, I mean, sure, you walk, we walk. I mean, I walk. At some point in our lives, we're all walking to a different destination. We all drive, for the most part, and many of us are also getting around the city via the public transit, and sometimes via bicycle. And we're all the same people, and so it makes sense for us to kind of work together to, explore common sense kind of safety solutions that make streets inviting and safe for all users, regardless of how you're using that space.
That's true. And I know, like I lived in Roslyn for a while, and I know that a form of improved transit was that they put in the bus lane from like, I think it's from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. or something like that. There's reserved hours, and people were like anxious about losing the parking during that time, but it seems to have worked out. And I think they're actually, I don't know if it's already started happening, they're doing one for the commute home too. I heard. So that's my best example of where I've seen it work, because I don't drive at all. I don't even really know how to drive.
Yeah, I think the rapid bus transit, I think there's probably a few examples of that, and certainly along Washington Street in Rosendale is probably one of the better, more recent ones. And it also highlights some of the challenges with making changes to street design, is that it is a complicated process, but overall, like hopefully I think that's been a positive thing for more people than not. I think certainly as a public transit user who's been on that bus line before and after with those rapid transit lanes, the commute time is much better, and it's servicing more people. So hopefully that's a positive thing.
I agree. So where can people go if they want to learn more or get involved with West Rocks Walks? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, pressing too many buttons. I will see if I can share a few links in the chat.
All right, yeah.
Let's see if this works. Well, maybe I'll do it in a second, but I think West Roxbury Main Street has a nice page that reviews, I think, some of the different resources and research that's been done looking specifically at Center Street in West Roxbury. Boston Transportation Department also has some resources. Mass Streets blog is a good resource for kind of all transit related issues that affect the Commonwealth. And I'll include a link to a new plan that was just released by by DCR regarding parkways, which is a large comprehensive document with some kind of exciting changes proposed. And then as far as readings or some kind of light reading, I like Walkable City by Jeff Speck is a good read, kind of broad introduction to, I think, lots of aspects about how we can make changes to improve kind of safety and usability for all street users. And then more focus on pedestrian safety is Angie Schmidt's Right of Way is a good book and one that I'd recommend.
First of all, you're the first person to make book recommendations. Second of all, I eat books like when I have spare time, so I appreciate those recommendations because I love to read, especially when I'm learning. So we ask every one of our change agents this question at the end of our conversation. Sorry for my phone not being on silent. What drives you personally to do this work?
Well, you know, I don't know that there's any one thing, I suppose, that like inspires me to do it. Like if anything lately, as I mentioned, with kind of the tough year that we've all had, you know, we've been somewhat kind of disengaged or uninspired. Because I think there are like so many, you know, honestly, I mean, personally, more important issues that face like our community, and that not like West Roxbury specifically, but larger community. But I think it probably goes back to just some kind of basic interest in trying to improve safety, for street users in the neighborhood, of all ages, all modes of transportation, and ultimately, like, probably started in some way with really me just wanting to be able to cross the street and go to the playground with my kids and feel safe doing that. And so, if that's something that I sometimes struggle with as a able-bodied individual, I think for others sometimes that is not the case and can be more challenging. And so, like I said, hopefully some of the things that we're doing are having positive impacts and improving the quality of life for our neighbors.
Definitely. Well, thank you for being here. And is there anything else you want to add before I let you go?
No, I appreciate the opportunity. And as soon as I figure out how to copy my a few links, I will drop those in the chat.
Awesome. We save the chat transcription so I can share those resources when we put up the video. So thank you. I know Zoom, we're mostly all on Zoom all day these days, so I appreciate you coming here at the end of your day and speaking with me and really the community at large.
I'm happy to do it. Nice to meet you, Kelly, and thanks again for the opportunity.
Thank you. Okay. So now I'm going to introduce Stephen Morris, who is a road diet activist, I would say. Stephen, let me know if you have a different title that you want me to use, from West Roxbury. Hi, Stephen. You there?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Oh, you got the camera to work. I love it.
I ran out of time, Kelly, to run into the office, so I have to do it by phone. Sorry about that.
It looks great.
And my reception's, I'm at my home and my reception's horrible here, so.
All right, we'll make it quick for both our sakes.
Yeah, get you out of the torture of talking.
No, I don't want to sound like an 80-year-old.
Oh, So I'm gonna use Kelly's voice. When I called her today, I thought I had the wrong number. I said, "You sound like an 80-year-old woman." So her laryngitis is definitely kicking in.
Oh, it's laryngitis. It's actually getting better. Surprisingly, it sounds terrible, but thank you for joining me for tonight. And I'm gonna ask a few questions just like I did with Will.
Sure.
And so what is the road diet situation in West Roxbury?
So it mirrors what Will just said. So with the COVID, everything kind of shut down. You know, BTD, I'm not sure they were even meeting that often. Zoom meetings aren't as effective as face-to-face. So it seems like all government kind of shut down, you know, not completely, but slowed down. So we think it was on hold. However, we've noticed now with the new mayoral elections coming up that the Boston Cyclist Union, which is behind West Roxbury Walks and supporting them, they're a larger group and they're trying to create bike lanes throughout the city. And, you know, in some places it could work, in some places it's not. They've already taken it down on Columbus Ave, I understand. I know Cambridge took down a few, and I believe
Cambridge has a lot.
South End. What's that? Can you hear me?
Cambridge has a lot.
What's that?
Cambridge has a lot. Last time I was there, I noticed that there was like, the street looked completely different from when I'd been there before. Around like
Yeah, I was talking,
the bridge.
I'm sorry. I was talking to the president of the firefighters union last night. We're at a function, and he told me about the Columbus Ave, saying emergency vehicles just couldn't manipulate around them, so they had to dismantle.
Oh wow. Okay, that's good to
So
know.
what's happening in West Roxbury, it seems like it's on hold. You know, the BTD was reviewing all sorts of things. You know, this all started, and I'm losing track of dates because of COVID. It's like that blank year that happened, but it was sometime, I think in August or maybe July of 2019. All of a sudden there was a meeting called at Holy Name that most of the community didn't know about, but all the bicyclists and the bike lane, you know, people that favored it all knew about it. And it was through a couple of people who knew it and got very active in notifying the whole community. So, you know, we went to this meeting to hear, well, what is this? You know, and like you said, road diet. Well, that's a road diet. Had no idea. And we were kind of shocked that BTD had devised only one plan, didn't come up with any options, had no background data about safety, no kind of plan B for emergency vehicles. Center Street is also an evacuation route in case of a FEMA type incident. There was nothing in place, no statistics. They just had some drawings, and you know, it was a little bit disconcerting. So I think they sensed at that meeting that it was, you know, that the majority of West Roxbury was not ready to accept this. So that's when I got involved, because I said, geez, you know, how did this all happen behind the scenes? And here I am. I think of myself as very active in the community. I live in West Roxbury. I was born in Rosendale, so not a townie. I did move 2 miles away from my original house. So I know this area, and I live here. I raised my children here. And now, you know, I have grandchildren coming into the world. You know, so I work in this area. So I'm in this area 24 hours a day, except for today. I was down the Cape doing some work. And I said, how did I not know about it? And I'm talking to other, you know, strong community leaders who, not elected officials, just, you know, very active in all sorts of volunteer groups. They said, I didn't know anything about it. So what I did is I talked to Jim Hennigan, who owns Hennigan Insurance. I said, Jim, and he's usually ear to the ground, knows what's going on. And he said, no, I knew nothing. I said, well, let's have a meeting. And, you know, there was a few other people we were talking to that they're very concerned. So we had a quick meeting, and we didn't know what to do. We just said, you know, who do we talk to? What do we do? And it seems like the road diet people are very organized and have this agenda, and we're starting with ground zero here. So we met and we decided to form. We didn't want to become, the West Roxbury Complaining Society. We said, let's be the positive. We said, let's call ourselves the West Roxbury Safety Association, and
I didn't know that. Thank you.
And let's review the BTD plans. And so we did, and they had a liaison, I forget her name, and she was out here, doing micro presentations to different businesses, mainly business groups, a few of the volunteer groups, for instance, the YMCA. That's when I met her. I was, at that point, I was the chair of the West Roxbury Y. And so I met her and got a very good picture of what was going on. And, it was going to change West Roxbury dramatically, but not positively. So, I had no opposition to change, but it's got to be sensible change.
So you already answered my question of how do you get involved? How did you get involved?
We informed them. What we did, Kelly, is we said right away, well, let's audit. And it seemed like the hotspot was from the Holy Name Rotary up to Spring Street.
Yeah.
Because they were going the Center Street Road diet, we didn't ignore Spring Street, but we tabled it because it seemed like that wasn't under the city's consideration right now. So what we did is a group of volunteers all went out and audited. We all took, I think, 3 intersections and audited for a series of self-made criteria, and it was lighting, meaning street illumination at nighttime, pedestrian lighting, crosswalk visibility, angle of the road. For the most part, Center Street's pretty straight, but there are some bends in it, particularly at Corey Street. We also looked at signage. There were a number of criteria we looked at. I first of all have to apologize. Most of my materials are in my office, but I think I saw in Kelly, I ran into a ton of traffic on Route 3. So, but we did a very effective audit, and we actually submitted it to BTD. And I think it was November of 2019, we hosted a meeting at the Irish Social Club. And we actually advertised it in the bulletin. It was open to the world. We preferred to have West Roxbury residents in there because we felt that they were most impacted by the changes being proposed. But everybody was invited. Anybody who had read the bulletin, anybody that saw our Facebook posts. We weren't trying to get a crowd that favored our position, so to speak. Very open. We actually wanted to present our ideas and then get feedback about our ideas. And the room had about 400 people in it. And I don't know if that's enough for a sampling in West Roxbury, but there was probably 390 opposed to the road diet and 10 in favor of it. So it's not well received. And the biggest complaints were, and I'm kind of, I don't know if that's one of your questions, Kelly, but I heard you asking Will, so jumping into.
No, so the next question is, what are the top 3 concerns you hear from residents about the road diet?
Yeah, so the concerns we heard, first of all, was side street traffic. I live on a side street, and I already in West Roxbury, and it's a cut through already. I have no problem with it. I knew what I was buying when I bought my house in 2002, so I know it's a cut through. My kids used to, I used to play catch and street hockey out there with them, and it was just like when I grew up in Rosendale. Everybody yelled, "Car, car!" Although I did notice we yelled it a little more often now than back in whenever I was born, which I'm not going to tell you. But I know it was a cut through, but I started saying, geez, common sense says this is not a good idea, because everybody has ways, and they're going to say, okay, if everything's backed up from the Faulkner Hospital up to the VA hospital on Center Street, where am I going to go? Well, I'll go up the VFW Parkway, and that can only hold so many cars. So then what's the next choice? They're going to go up Weld Street. They're going to cut down Corey. They're going to cut down my street. They're going to go up Vermont Street. And then that's on this side of Center. On the other side of Center, so that would be the YMCA side, they're going to go up Bellevue Street, down Bellevue Street. St. Teresa's Avenue is a very heavily trafficked, small side street. So that's where they go. Nobody's going to sit in traffic because they won't. so they're going to go somewhere. There's over 16,000 cars that pass on Center Street on a daily basis. Road diets, we did a lot of studies. Road diets max out at 20,000 cars. So with, there was no plan again with BTD. Well, what happens when you hit 20,000 cars traveling? But I guess a road diet would eliminate cars because they'd all be on the side streets. So that was the main thing. The other thing was emergency vehicles. West Roxbury is comprised of, on average, I don't even know how to phrase this, but we have the oldest population in the city of Boston. We have 7 nursing homes. There is a big call for emergency vehicles, mainly ambulances, which are preceded with the triage unit from the fire department. They would have no way to go. There was some construction work done on Center Street last week, and it was single file. And I'm just sitting there, and there's a long line of cars. I was at somewhere about Corey Street, I think, getting south at this time. There's a long line of cars going both ways. I said, if an ambulance came down there, we're going to add at least 2 minutes to his trip anywhere before Roxbury Latin. And if you go beyond that, we could be adding 4 minutes. It was just ridiculous. And in New York City, they ran into this problem. The fire department actually issued strong statements to the mayor's office saying, we can't do our jobs, and we're notifying the mayor's office that we cannot assume liability for the problem. So they're trying to shift the impending liability that they knew was coming up with these road diets. The third thing was, and it runs counter to what the bike people. I was talking about the liaison at the from BTD, Boston Transportation. She came to a West Roxbury Business and Professional Association in, I believe it was September of 2019, and I felt bad for her. I think she was under the weather that day, and she'd always been very poised, and she took a lot of hard hits, and I always admired. I didn't agree with her, but I respected her immensely. But she finally just broke and said, it's all about global warming. Well, I can tell you, I don't think anybody in that room favors global warming, but you have to be practical too. There has to be a balance. If we want to get rid of all global warming, well, stop flying airplanes, stop driving cars. That's the extreme. And you've got to find balance. And everybody, somebody came up to me and very sweetly said, hey, Steve, and I thought they were making fun. They said, Steve, can you tell me how many miles per gallon does a car sit idling in 20 minutes of traffic? And I said, what? And I'm like trying to do the math, and I go, oh, 0. So you just would have cars sitting there polluting, going nowhere. Eventually they would go somewhere, and the same amount of pollution would be going into our air. So I think that pollution would increase. I don't have any stats on that. I do have some stats that counter what Will had mentioned about safety, but we can talk about that. I don't mean to dominate your question. So
no.
I just get animated because it is exciting, and we have a great group on the West Roxbury Safety Association. And they nominated me, I guess, to be the spokesperson, but they gave me just great data to work with, and most of it was out of California, which is the leader in the road diets, and they've had a lot of problems, and we can talk about those at any point.
Thank you. That's all good information, and I hear those concerns. Have there been counter proposals or alternative proposals that West Roxbury Safety Association has put forth, or different ideas?
Yeah, we came up with some very good ideas. So one of the things, we looked at, I told you about the audit that we did, and also just watching things, for my office overlooks Center Street, and we're at a bend in the road where really I have a view about 3 blocks down, and particularly in one direction. There's just not that many bicycles, but if there's 1 bicycle, let's try and work with the 1 bicycle. So if there's 10, let's try and work with 10. And we took that into account, because just so I am a bicyclist, I'm going to admit I haven't been on my bike in a year. But one of my favorite routes was to go up to the Arboretum. I'd circle Peters Hill. That's 1 mile around, and that's a tough hill going up. And then I'd shoot down to down through the Second Arboretum down to the Jamaica Way, over to Jamaica Pond, and I'd eventually end up at the Hatch Cell. And then I'd come back. I'd usually go up to Harvard along the Charles River and then cut over through Brighton. And one of my favorite runs. But a lot of it, I was on Com Ave, and there was no dedicated lanes, and Com Ave can barely fit the parked cars on the 2 lanes of traffic. So, there were times I definitely felt a little bit hairy out there. But I said, it's a risk, but I was respectful. I obeyed the signals. I didn't try and be aggressive and weave out. So, I had no problems, but, I understand that any bicyclist concerned. So what we did in our audit is we looked at all the factors I mentioned earlier, and the biggest problem we felt was at Hastings Street. So there was a death there, and it was not in the crosswalk. A poor woman had gotten out of it. She was driving a car and parked her car in front of I call it the West Rock Street pub, but then it morphed into the Squealing Pig. Yeah. So she was in front of the Squealing Pig, and I think they were heading across the street to the bakery. And she had gone around the back of the car to get her husband, who was getting out of the passenger side, I think somewhat slowly. And it was late afternoon, and right at that bend, you must be facing due west, but the sun was low in the sky, hit a drive, and the driver was a female nurse who got out and immediately administered help after hitting this poor woman, and she passed away despite everybody's efforts. And but there were no charges against the nurse. She was not speeding. It was just a horrible accident. But that's a very, very well-traveled intersection for pedestrians and for cars. So that's really the hot point. But there were tweaks at every intersection. And Kelly, I'd love to. I don't. It's pretty. It's a pretty long file. I don't know if you'd attach it to this or if you just want to review it. But I'm sharing it with some of the city councilor candidates right now, so that they're aware of it. Yeah, and one of the things though is getting back to the bicyclists is, what we said was, well, why not? And I forget all of our options. Oh, and the other thing, I'm sorry, on the pedestrian lights at every intersection, what we feel is that today's world is instant gratification. You press a button and you get this. You can order online, and the next day it's delivered to your house. So everything's quick and immediate response. Well, we were concerned that possibly pedestrians are not waiting for their light too, because we've seen pedestrians walk across lights. So what we thought that the city should do is on-demand lights at every intersection that needs a crosswalk like that, so that pedestrian gets a crossing signal right away. It does not have to wait for, this line of traffic, this cross street and everything go. So they're prioritized. That was number one. So we feel like we really address pedestrian safety. The second thing, as we said, well, how do we address bicyclist safety? So the bicyclist safety, and we had other options for the pedestrians, but that was one of the major ones, including some other additional lighting. We wanted to shy away from, I don't know if you've seen intersection where they've got blinking lights, they've got yellow signs all over the place. And I'll be honest with you, on Washington Street up at High Point Village, I always stop for pedestrians. 99.9% of the time I stop for pedestrians and crosswalk. If I see them, it's 100% of the time. But I went down there. It was the first time I'd seen all these lights, and I'm sitting there looking around, and I didn't see a pedestrian. Luckily, he was in the other line of traffic. But I went through. I said, "Oh Jesus, I didn't even see that guy because I was so distracted with all of this." So we felt that too much lighting, it almost leads to, I don't know what they call it in the nursing world, but with too many beeps and buzzes, you become immune to them. So we thought the on-demand solved some of that. It eliminated all the noise and just had it on demand. So then, we also, the city did jump on one thing. I don't know if you remember, but back in 2019, a lot of the crosswalks had brick crosswalks. They wanted to give it a Beacon Hill effect. Well, the problem is cars coming up couldn't see them. So we suggested right away eliminating those and then making sure the white lines are painted more frequently. And BTD didn't tell us that they took up our option, but we noticed they started doing work on that right away. So we kind of did pat ourselves a little bit on the back on that. So we said, yay, we won one battle. But now going back to the bicyclists, we said, okay, why don't we do signage first of all on either end of the street? And then we extended the street out to Route 1, so out to Spring Street. So signage there, signage at Holy Name Rotary, and the signage could be whatever BTD recommends, but we were thinking along the lines of heavily enforced area, traffic monitoring and everything else. Then the friendly signs about share the road with the bicyclists and have the stick figure of a bicycle figure. Then we thought is also in the slow lane of each direction of traffic, do the white painted figures and say bikes are entitled to the full lane, which they have down at South Street and Center Street. They clearly say bikes have the right to have the full lane. So we said do that. And then also, I'm trying to remember if the new captain was in at this time, who's now Darren Greeley, but we had conversations with the police. No, actually we did not. We thought that another thing that the police should do is step up enforcement, which just made me nervous because I don't want tickets, but but I am a cautious driver. But we said step up the enforcement, and then we also noticed in Rosendale Square they have a police vehicle that they just leave there. It's an empty vehicle, and I don't know if there's a patrol person out on foot, walking the beat. But I've never seen a walking policeman, so I thought it was just kind of like a dummy car. And they park it either at Washington and Cummins Highway or at the bus stop and train station, but they park it in prominent areas. So we just thought some visibility would do that. Well, right after the November meeting, that's I think when Darren Greeley came in. He actually stepped up enforcement very big, and he was sending us numbers, but the tickets they were writing, I felt bad. He actually said we started the first 2 weeks with all warnings, except if somebody was belligerent and wouldn't cooperate or did something excessively dangerous. But we did warnings, and we said, let's start off with education. So they went right out there and they did that. They did not like my idea about the empty police car at all, and I don't know why, but they didn't like it, so they didn't do that. So they stepped up enforcement, and we felt like with that, and going back, I was saying about the number of bicyclists, there's just not that many, and the argument from their side as well, if we had the roads, there'd be more bicyclists out there. But I drive the VFW Parkway almost daily. I'm making runs to Home Depot and out that way. And there's a dedicated bike lane there. And I can tell you, since this started in 2019, all the times I've been in, I'm not on there, 8 hours a day. But if I've seen 6 bicycles total, that's a lot. On Center Street, if I've seen more than 8 a day, and I'm not sitting in a window looking out for 8 hours a day. I do actually do some work. I don't see that many bicyclists, so it didn't seem fair to take away 50% of the travel road to give to this minor group of people, and then cause all these other problems. And the problems, Kelly, I will send to you. We came up with about 35 to 40 reasons why it's not good. And then one of the leading things was safety. Will had mentioned about crashes going down. Actually, no, the first person who did the presentation saying crash frequency went down 19 to 43%. That's not what they're finding. Ventura, California looked at theirs. Their vehicle to vehicle accidents and vehicle to pedestrian accidents skyrocketed with the bike lanes. And actually using that same thing, another argument was the closing of businesses, is that businesses need some parking. This plan was going to eliminate somewhere around 18 parking spaces along Center Street, and that's pretty significant, which is from Holy Name to Spring Street. That's a lot of parking space. I think it represented 10% of the spaces. I think there's 180, but I'm not sure of my numbers there. But it was significant, and if it was 5%, that's significant. So the businesses need that Tony from Superflash said, "Where are my trucks going to deliver?" And the response was, "Well, you could have them do 3 a.m. deliveries." And he said, "No, I can't, because truck drivers don't want to work at 3 a.m. They want to work a business day. So I can't do that." The hardware store, El Miranda, said the same thing, said, "I don't know where the trucks are going to go. I'm going to need to block the complete lane of traffic." Then, they said, "Well, we could coordinate with the police to do this and that." And it just, they never came up with an answer. We had actually asked them too. Will had mentioned about better, maybe the initial person, she had mentioned about better sight lines with the road day. There's not, because when her pictures didn't show what they were proposing on Center Street. What they were going to do is, hey, keep, they morphed it a couple times, but the main one they were going with, that BTD was running with, was they're going to keep the one lane of traffic at the center line going in either way. The next line of traffic was going to be parked cars, so that the lane of travel. Then the parked car lane was going to be the bike lane.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were on Center Street heading north towards Holy Name, and you wanted to take a right on Park Street, you were going to have to look over a line of parked cars, God forbid it be a tall van or something, and hope that a bicyclist, and bicyclist is not just somebody with pedal power, bicycle with under 35, it's either cc's or horsepower, I forget the measurement, are allowed to go into these bike lanes. So they're fast traveling vehicles. And what about a passenger in a car? Opening a car door, drivers are more road aware. Most passengers aren't really in tune as much as a driver. They're going to open up doors, they're going to take out bicycles and get hurt themselves. So we're not saying any safety improvement, we're saying actually a downgrade.
Well, it's always good to hear both
Yeah.
sides. Where can people go if they want to learn more? Because we're rounding up the end of the hour.
So West Roxbury Safety Association on Facebook.
Okay.
We like everybody, so even if we're aware of who's on the bicyclist, if they want to sign up and whatever, we're fine. We want information out there. I do want to touch on one of the resources that Will talked about, Walkable City. Kelly, you should read that. Michelle Wu actually gave me that book. She's in favor of the bike lanes, and she and I disagree on it, and very pleasantly. I like Michelle. I won't be voting for her, but I like her very much. And she gave me that book, and I read in the book, and I actually dog-eared it, and I think that's in my office. So I dog-eared certain pages, but he came right out and said, something like 90% of these bike lanes fail. Providence took it down. There's so many examples of where they took it down. So he even says, if this isn't for everybody, and he listed like 5 criteria of when it's good, and West Roxbury didn't fit any of those criteria. And I said that to Michelle. I said, Michelle, you and I need to sit down and have a cup of coffee or a beer and talk about these points, because she walked away from the book thinking it supported bike lanes, and I came across reading it saying, no, it's saying right here on these different pages, it's not a good idea for West Roxbury.
I can't wait to read it, and I'm hoping people watching this now or later read it.
And one other thing,
their mind.
board.com. This is something that anybody can use. So if wherever your address you're living at, or you're interested in investigating, lawscore.com will rate it. If you look at I sampled, I think it was 20 addresses from Welch Street on Center Street up to Spring Street, Center Street and Spring Street. I sampled 20 addresses. All of the scores, I think the lowest one was around 85 out of 100, and that's considered very, very walkable. So I find it hard that Will has a hard time walking around the city because around.
Let's not call anyone out by name.
And I don't mean to say that, but I'm wondering why he feels it's so safe when we've got this scoring thing that home buyers use to decide whether they should buy a house or not because of walking. And I'm saying I don't understand that. I think it's a global warming issue more than anything, and that's I'm not in favor of global warming, but we've got to do it sensibly.
I think you and Will should go out for a beer or coffee, maybe.
I met his colleagues Ben and Jason, and we've had very cordial talks. We disagree 100% from each other, but I would say they're cordial. You know, I don't ever want to put anybody down and make it personal. So.
Right. We ask guys, we got to be quick because it's only supposed to be an hour, but what drives you to do this work? We ask every person at the end of their time here.
What drives me, I thought I kind of answered it earlier. So
Yeah,
I work in West Roxbury on Center Street. I raised my family here. My grandchildren are now being raised in West Roxbury. I volunteer for all sorts of things. I'm pretty much, when I grew up in Rosendale, we always thought it was West Roxbury as, the people we didn't like. Well, I guess I've become the person I don't like, but I love West Roxbury. I'm very concerned about it. I am a real estate agent, which I'm nervous about putting out because I'm sure somebody will decide to try and hurt me that way. But I see values going down if we lose the business district and people can't do, and if there's cars flying up and down side street, it's going to affect values and desirability. There's no other way. So those are my three motives.
Heard. Well, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I know you're busy and all day, and I really appreciate your time. And this is why I'm doing these halls, to have conversations, like not necessarily group conversations yet, but to hear from people who have different views of certain topics in the city, because I'm going to have to do that every day as a counselor, is hear from people who want one thing and hear from people who want another thing. And I think it's a good way for practice, but also that we're putting it out there for people to listen. And if they don't have a position on it, maybe they take a position now, maybe they don't. But I just appreciate you and Will being here tonight, and Mia doing her presentation. And this conversation is not over by any means, but this is a nice introduction tonight. I know we're at 8 o'clock, and I know most of the people in the room were a part of the presentation right now, but if there's any questions, speak now. I'm gonna put stuff in the chat for y'all. And feel free, both of you, Will and Steven, send me all of the reports, all the links, all the things. Yeah, so thank you so much, and I will talk to you both separately sometime soon, I promise. So with that, I'm gonna say good night, everyone, and I hope you enjoyed the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.